I'm Bethany. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Technology Will Save Us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do to kind of give you some context as to kind of a perspective that we have around some of the challenges of hardware and a specific kind of lesson that we've learned around how to get over some of those challenges. So the first thing I'm going to start with is a little bit of a plug. So as Matt said, if I can get this to work, as Matt said, we have an office in New York and in London. Why isn't this working? Yeah. Again, you can see our logo, Anime. It's really nice, isn't it? So yeah, we have offices in New York and London, and we doubled our revenue last year, which was really exciting, and we're now selling in over 1,600 retailers. So you might have seen us somewhere like Barnes & Nobles or Nordstrom, and specifically I'm sharing this because building a consumer-facing hardware business is a very particular kind of journey, and that's the journey we've been on, so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. Our name is kind of all what we represent. It's kind of our mission. So we really believe that basically kids empowered with technology and with skills will be able to impact their world, their particular world, and the wider context of the world in pretty profound ways. Some of the things that we talk about are beyond just my experience as a founder. So I'm a mom and a designer, and having a child in this kind of era is quite unique. You still walk into toy departments and you're faced with pink and blue aisles, and you're faced with a lot of kind of technology or educational toys that are really not productive tools. They're essentially just ways for kids to be much more consumptive with the way they use tech. And we really believe that giving kids hands-on experiences is going to help them really invent what they might need to do in the future. So one of the stats we talk about is 65% of kids in kindergarten today will have to invent their job, which is a pretty amazing stat. It's pretty exciting for those that are on the kind of edge of what's happening in the world, and pretty daunting for teachers and parents and even some kids that might not know what they're going to pave their way as. Some other things that are happening that are pretty exciting is 15 countries in Europe and almost every state in America now requires STEM or computer science as part of their national curriculums, which for a group of early adopters and a lot of people that are entrepreneurs already and have probably studied technology, that is something that should have happened 10 years ago, but is only happening now. But that being said, the shift that is happening is pretty important for the next generation and for all of us. So what we do is we create essentially experiences that help kids to make, play, code, and invent with technology. So all of the experiences are designed around different themes. We have different age groups and different price points, which create different accessibility points for kids to enter into. So the products range from wearable kits that kids have to make and code themselves, to electronic Play-Doh, so conductive dough, where kids are squishing and creating their own electronics with conductive Play-Doh, to things like synthesizers that you have to build out of a cardboard box. And this idea of getting hands-on with technology is really important. So that's the kind of range that we develop. And everything's connected to a digital platform. And the digital platform is where content, coding, and community live. So we've developed a block-based system for programming. So similar to what a lot of kids are already learning right now. So a lot of kids are learning Scratch, which was developed by MIT. It's a block-based programming language that's very powerful and really useful. And so what we're doing is building on top of that. It's a proprietary system, but what it allows kids to do is to program hardware. So programming hardware is a really different experience than programming a screen. So we're asking kids not to just say if then, we're asking them to do things like when do. When I turn this on, when I press this button, the light turns on, or my movement creates some activity. So it's all about programming the physical world. And beyond the open-ended coding platform, we also have community and content where kids can actually create their own identities, they can save their code, they can share their code, where this kind of making becomes a part of every everyday play patterns. So that's a really important part of what we're doing. So just to show you a little bit about what some kids have done. So this is one of our kits. It's a wearable that kids have to make and code themselves. So it's, you turn it on, and basically it has a snap band. And it's 8 rainbow LEDs, a motion sensor, and a compass that kids can program to do anything. And because it responds to your movement, you have to be active. So you might be on your computer programming it to, for example, the kid in the left, he wanted to create the toothbrush trainer. So brushed his teeth for 2 minutes, shows his mom that he brushed his teeth, and it shows rainbow lights. Or things like bike lights, that use the accelerometer, where you turn it upside down for a red light, the other side for a white light. Or things like costumes. So the little girl on the right wanted to be Iron Woman. She wanted to run super fast, and when she ran, she wanted her arc reactor to essentially reveal different lights. And for us, the idea of programming, because you want to show your mom you brushed your teeth, is a pretty good reason to want to program. You don't have to build some crazy and insane thing. Sometimes it's just really simple activities that can inspire something really important. So those are some of the products that we've made. And the last product that I'm going to show you is one that we did with the BBC. So we did our first partner product with the BBC last year. The BBC is a pretty important organization, as you know. They reach about 98% of the population in the UK, which is pretty impressive. There are not many organizations at all that reach that many people and have that much influence. So this was one of their most ambitious projects in about 30 years. And what we did with them is created this little guy right here called the Microbit. It's a pocket-sized computer that allows kids to invent. It's like a Swiss Army knife. We kind of compare it to kind of an Arduino for kids. So it has buttons you can program, an LED array that you can program. It has Bluetooth, it has an edge connector, and it has an edge connector. So basically you can attach it to lots of different things and invent and create with it. And I think one of the most important things about the product was that it was given to 1 million 12-year-olds in the UK for free. And obviously that's a really important part of our mission, which is around empowering as many kids as possible with accessible tech that they can really use creatively. So, on to my point. So I wanted to give some context to kind of what we do and how we do it and why we do it. So I've been in hardware for long enough, not that long, but long enough to kind of know the challenges of hardware, the sleepless nights of things not shipping on time, of bombs being higher than you anticipated, of things being stuck on the sea or in the air, or certifications not working. I mean, the gamut of challenges is immense. And I think we've reached an interesting conclusion around, I think, a solution to some of those challenges. And I think this is probably more suited for maybe some consumer-facing businesses, although I think maybe it might be applicable to B2B as well. But I'm just going to share with you my kind of perspective on some learning that we've had on this journey. So I have 3 reasons why I think range is one of the solutions for hardware. And what I mean by range is having a collection of things, a collection of offers for the customer that solve specific problems. So I'm going to share the 3 reasons why I think this might be a useful solution to consumer-facing hardware businesses. So the first is range increases frequency of purchase. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail in each of them. And again, this is kind of live thinking, because we've gone through a kind of process of doing this, and it's come out pretty well, so that's kind of why I'm sharing it. The second is that range lets you iterate and find product market fit, which is this beautiful, coveted word that seems to present itself all the time, and sometimes you know you have it, sometimes you don't, but I think there's a process in that we've kind of gone through, which is really important. And range also improves business efficiency, so I'll go into each of these in a little bit of detail. So the first is around increasing frequency. So the problem historically is that a lot of consumer-facing businesses are constantly focusing on margins, and teams are always reviewing COGS, which is super fundamental to any successful commercial hardware product. However, iterating and continuously working on one thing and trying to get that thing perfect can be incredibly costly. and it can really not allow you to move beyond that particular product. And what we've found, so this year we launched 3 new products. What we've found is that by having range, it's allowed us to move customers around a journey. We have different price points in our range, so our products range from $27 to $100. That allows customers to enter into their journey at different price points and at different accessibility points. And it's increased our frequency of purchase by 3 times. So that's been a really successful experiment to us. What range have also allowed us to do is to create things like bundles. It's allowed us to take products and pull them together in really user-centered themes that help customers to see how their kids or how they themselves can enter into this world of creating and making in a really unique way. So commercially, it's been really successful for us, and it's also helped us to really understand kind of our product and the experiences we're trying to create for customers in a new way. So the second thing is around product market fit and iteration. So product market fit is an iterative process. It's a journey where you're constantly going back and trying to kind of learn from your customer and learn from their behaviors and experiences to make a better product. Hardware, that can be very slow and very expensive and frustrating because you're constantly trying to go back and make this thing better and perfect, which in some cases is required and necessary. But what we've kind of started to understand by creating a range is that we're able to really improve things by bringing customers on a journey and looking at different products for different reasons. So that beautiful chart on the left-hand side, which is probably one of my favorite charts we've ever made, is our product development process. We have a pretty tight product development process, which is very user-centered, so kids are a part of every stage of our process. It's a mix of sprints and gates. So the gates allow us to know that we've achieved certain things within our product development process that allow us to make sure it's adding value, that it's understood, that it's creating the emotional relationship to the product that we're trying to seek, that the learning is actually happening and understood. If we don't pass a gate, we don't move to the next stage. What this helps us to do, beyond just create really magical products, it's pretty rigorous and pretty tight, but things like the mover come out of it. So it's a really wonderful process. But what it also allows us to do is to expand and contract. So we can use this process for 4-month product development processes all the way to year product development processes, which allows us to understand how to make range, which is great. We can put teams on it and we can create new products within the range based on that process. And so for us, what this allows us to do is essentially to really monitor different products for different reasons. So we have ROI curves for every single product. We can look at those curves in our weekly meetings, in our OKR sessions, and understand how a product is doing, if it's doing well, if it's performing well, if it's being understood, if there's enough engagement. If it's not, then we have to see if we're going to kill it, are we going to iterate it, are we going to put it back through a process to make it better. And I think what this has helped us to really do is to kind of iterate in a much faster, much more stride-like process that allows us to really understand when a product is really working and how to propel it to the next stage. It also allows us to share supply chain. So as we're looking at the performance of the product, we can look at our range and decide how we're going to use our supply chain across that range, which creates a ton of efficiency in our product range. Okay, and then the last area is really about improving business efficiency. So what we found is that a lot of times what happens is during a product development process and then a launch, the whole team is focused on this launch. It's focused on this really specific event that's happening, which means a lot of other parts of the business are not as live, they're not as active as kind of certain parts of the business. And what we've found is that by having range, it's really created a lot of activity across the business at all times in the business. So we have more products to work with, which means that marketing teams are creating new bundles, creating new activities, creating new pathways for young people and kids to do things with. It means our retail team is able to talk to customers throughout the year about new products in the horizon, about what's happening in those products, about the successes of some products, the kind of ways that we're developing new products. It's meant that, well, two things. It's meant that we're really busy all the time, which is a good and a bad thing. But it means that everyone is very live in the business for a significant amount of time. And I think a lot of that is due to range. And so this has been a really important lesson for us this year. So just to close, so the three things that I think we've learned most about creating new products is these three things. Really increasing frequency of purchase. We plan to launch 5 new products this year, which is really exciting. And we're really excited about what that's going to increase frequency to. I mean, our focus is on getting kids making as much as possible throughout childhood. And if they're able to have products to help them go through that journey, that's a good thing for us. Range also allows us to iterate more. So we're able to take products now that are hero products, successful products, and build universes around them. Take those products and expand them into new kind of categories, which is a really exciting opportunity. And then again, it helps us to improve our business efficiencies. It's helping all parts of the business to have a lot of tangible output and a lot of content to work with at all times of the year, which again, I think is a super important part of consumer-facing businesses, and has helped us to really do that in an exciting way. So that's us.
Thank you very much. Great. So how does that work from a supply chain perspective? Because Range is awesome, but that's building a lot of products. So how do you guys do it?
Yeah, so we look a lot at across the supply chain, and we try and leverage shared components across the supply chain that allows us to, well, one, create efficiencies in our supply chain, keeps COGS down, and create economies of scale. So that has been a really big lesson for us. It also means that in our range, as we're planning our product roadmap, we can actually create briefs around that for the product team, wanting to leverage certain components that we think are really valuable to us, and see how we can extend them in different ways. So that's one of the ways we do that.
Do you have questions?
Yeah. No, I was curious about the age in which children are really able to start programming these things. Honestly, I don't think I could program it to do the lights properly, but I would like to give it to my nephew. Where does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the perspective we have is between 4 and 7. We're not really trying to teach kids programming. We're trying to get them hands-on with tech. So we have things like electronic Play-Doh, where they're having open-ended experiences creating essentially circuits. So they're able to use their imagination and kind of very simple principles around electricity to start to build circuits with something very kind of tactile and tangible. So that kind of world of conductive dough and kind of tangible play experiences is really important. At that stage, also kids are trying to essentially develop what is called mastery. They're trying to kind of understand how a process works and then be able to apply it again and again and again. And so that's really the experience we're creating at that kind of age group. When you get to kind of 8 to 10, then it's about outcomes. And so things like the mover or the gamer is where kids want like very specific outcomes. And so with the mover, you have this very specific experience with inputs and outputs. And that's where we start to include things like programming. So with the mover, you start to use block-based programming. You start to use your own kind of imagination and your own kind of agency to solve problems around you, which is really important. When we get to 10 to 12, that's when it's about open-ended experimentation. So things like the microbit are really great. What we did with the microbit, which I think was really special, is we tried to create just enough tech for kids to do the most amount of things, which I think is a really hard thing to do. So not trying to fill it with so much functionality that you're overwhelmed with choice and options that, quite frankly, like 0.0% of 12-year-olds are ever going to use. We wanted to give them just enough to be able to do a really extensive amount of invention and creativity. And so when we get to the kind of 10 to 12 age group is when we start to include more complex programming. There's a lot of craft involved in it, but it's really about invention and creating kind of beyond just kind of hands-on experiences. So that's kind of our philosophy around it.
What are you doing to create barriers to entry for competitors such as Little Bits or Lego Mindstorms?
What are we doing to create barriers?
Yes.
I think our biggest success is accessibility. Our products range from $27 to $100, and most products in our category are 100 plus, 200, to buy a robot for a kid that's 7, that's 350 pounds or dollars, is a big ask for a parent, especially in a category that's changing so fast. So we have worked really hard to create supply chains that allow us to keep price points very accessible. We have range, which I think is another thing. Most kind of people in this category have 2 products, 3 products sometimes. We want to have, by 2019, we want to have 24 products in our range. So we want to create, like, if this is childhood, there's a kit and an experience all throughout childhood for you to really have experiences around the breadth of what technology can offer you. And then I think the other thing is the platform. So all of our kits are connected to what we call the kind of digital best friend of your kits. It's where programming happens, it's where content is shared. We have a ton of partnerships being developed around that content as well. So I think those are some really important parts of our kind of ethos that have allowed us to kind of grow and scale and sit next to the likes of Littlebits, who we love, like we love them and we love Aya, but differentiate ourselves in a really relevant way to a really mass audience.
All right, very cool. One last one over there.
So have you considered moving outside of the kind of younger folk demographic and moving into, people later in life who might be interested in technology but don't have a great entry point?
Yeah, we've considered lots of new kind of verticals or new kind of customer groups. I think one thing that we've done over the last 2 years, which has been really important, is to focus, like, double down on kids and be really clear that that's the group we want to deliver to. Someone told me this once, which has always stuck with me: find an audience and drive a truck through it. Like, just deliver as best as you can to that audience, and I think that's what we want to commit to for a while. It's really easy, especially as a really creative team, to like grab the shiny new thing, which is really hard to not do. But we really want to stay focused on kids for now, and I think that will give us the permission and the opportunity to open up new spaces as we grow.
Cool.
Very good. It's all about discipline. All right, thank you so much. This was terrific. Thank you.